Welcome to Shoreside, the Coastal Resilience Podcast and the most resilient podcast in the world. Funded by the Department of Homeland Security and broadcasting out of beautiful Chapel Hill, North Carolina, we speak with the undisputed experts in coastal resilience. Bruce Rosenblum back in the studio once again. So great to have you back with us as well. And if you're just now tuning in, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. We've been working so very hard at the CRC to make the most crucial and hard-hitting content in the coastal resilience game. And with hurricane season heating up out there, we've been making some moves behind the scenes to deliver that content directly to you. You see, this whole show is part of a network. Nobody does it alone in this game. And thanks to some crosstalk between us and my dear colleague, Marty LaChance, out there in Purdue University, I have the distinct pleasure of announcing this special crossover, massive collaboration between Shoreside and the Natural Hazards Engineering Research Infrastructure. That's NHERI for short. Big news. Shout out to Marty. She did so much behind the scenes to put us in touch with our next guest. And what a guest we have for you today. He's a meteorologist Hall of Famer and winner of the Broadcaster of the Year Award from the National Weather Association. Over 25 years in the newsroom, providing live premium coverage of the storms and hurricanes that hit our country so very hard. Now, his list of awards goes down the page, and he's still in the game as a leading expert on hazard mitigation. Introducing the Associate Director of the International Hurricane Research Center and former ABC7 Chief Meteorologist, Mr. Erik Salna. Erik, thank you very, very much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you very much. My pleasure to be here. That's the best introduction I think I've ever received. Thank you.
You flatter me, Mr. Salna. It's a pleasure to have you here. Very humbled to just have you in our presence today. And speaking of being humbled and big things going on, you actually just said some very big things at Disasters Expo USA. Now that's one of the biggest events in the world for emergency managers. Tell us, how was that? How was Miami?
Well, yeah, that was a great experience. This particular expo, the Natural Disasters Expo, rather new on the playing field, but they bring together disaster, natural hazard experts at one place to deliver messages. And so my messages were from FIU and from our research and big picture in terms of natural hazards across the country. And so I talked about the wonderful research we do at the Wall of Wind and a little bit about hurricanes. And when we talk big picture, I'm with the FIU Extreme Events Institute, and you see an equation right there on the homepage, and it's the hazard risk equation. So the messaging at that expo was we have the end result of hazards, which could be just an emergency or bigger, a disaster, or even bigger yet, a catastrophe. It's all dependent on the hazard, but more importantly, exposures and vulnerability. So exposures is how many people and buildings are in harm's way that can be hit by that hazard. And then vulnerabilities, how is that community prepared with emergency management, building policy, building codes? So that's another way to carry on this conversation with natural hazards. And that's the way I did it at that expo.
Ooh, a lot to talk about here. You see, you're getting tapped by some very important organizations and folks to lend your expertise and let people know what the deal is regarding hazard mitigation. Before we dive into things, though, I really want to highlight for our listeners just how much of a big deal that you are. For a moment, let's go back to the year 2004. June 15th, New Orleans, Louisiana. You're stepping into the spotlight to talk to a crowd at the 33rd Conference on Broadcast Meteorology. This is 1 year before Hurricane Katrina. What can you tell us about the American Meteorological Society and what you did for it?
Well, the AMS is obviously the American Meteorological Society. It represents the meteorology and climate science folks. Has an annual conference every year. And then there's different divisions of that, of course. And then there's the broadcast meteorology group. And so at that time, giving a presentation with regards to the work that we're doing that at that time that I was working in television in Southeast Texas. So just talking about hurricanes in general and dealing with hurricanes in a community and how to forecast your way through that.
Ooh. And there's also the AMS Certified Broadcast Meteorologist seal. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's a great question. So within the broadcast media, and the viewers are going to watch television and then watch the weathercasters on the various local affiliates, and a lot of them have different types of backgrounds, if you will, and which is fine. And but what the AMS decided to do was, for many years, had the broadcast seal, the AMS broadcast seal, for many years, seal of approval, and they decided to upgrade it to what's called the Certified Broadcast Meteorologist, the CBM. So on television, you may watch a weathercaster that may have an AMS seal, or maybe the CBM seal. And then there is another organization called the National Weather Association. They also came up with a certification process and a seal. What that does, Bruce, it does kind of raises the bar for the person that's doing the weathercasting, that they at least have had some schooling, some training, some education to obtain a seal. So that keeps them current, and then gives them now more, credibility in terms of being a weathercaster.
Ooh, and this is what I want to dial in for our listeners. In other words, you were on one of the boards of the organization that essentially certifies television people who do weather. That makes you the meteorologist among meteorologists, the highest level. And I believe that's one of the reasons why you got tapped by the government to talk about storm impacts. I want to fast forward for a moment. October 14th, 2021. You just got introduced by Congressman Carlos Jimenez. What did you do then for the U.S. Committee on Science, Space, and Technology?
Well, that was just an honor to be asked. To be part of a not just a subcommittee hearing, but it was the full committee. So that was quite an honor and quite an experience. And to be asked to talk to the members about, in general, when it comes to extreme weather events across the country, that was the topic of that hearing. But what it is we can do across the country in terms of being better prepared and being more resilient. So I just shared with them the things we're doing here at FIU and big picture things, and that is having great partners, NOAA, National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center, but being also a Weather Ready Nation ambassador. The NOAA has this great program, Weather Ready Nation. It's a big picture across the country. What can all of us do to keep that ball moving down the field, to be more resilient and prepared for the next event? And so I just shared with them, the key points of that whole initiative. And here at FIU, we are a Weather Ready Nation ambassador. We were the first one in South Florida. And so being part of that team, of resilience and being better prepared, because we know moving forward, these extreme events are not going away. They're more frequent. They're affecting more and more people, and it's a big issue. So being part of an initiative like that is really supportive.
And Erik, you're a brilliant advocate for this topic right here, preparation and making sure that we are a weather-ready nation. But let me ask you, do you think that the committee took your recommendations to heart? Is the needle getting moved?
I feel so. I think it, from what I mentioned, was well received, and there were some other guests in that particular committee hearing as well. The good news is there are members of Congress that are hearing and are understanding the importance of extreme events, weather events, and how we need to do better as best we can as far as being better prepared. And there's different ways to go about doing that. And so I felt like there was, yes, they cared about it, and that they want to, keep connected with various groups and organizations and the science to help, do better as a nation.
That's good. It's good to hear that we are moving forward and they're taking what you're saying seriously, because we're moving into a critical period with sea level rise and climate change right now. But one of the things you said during that hearing that really stood out to me was this quote. You said, either we reduce risk or risk will reduce us. That is a very powerful statement. And with that in mind, what can you tell us about that and also the Extreme Events Institute?
Sure. So the Extreme Events Institute is an institute here at FIU that it does a variety of research, primarily focused on hurricanes. Dr. Rich Olson is the director of the Extreme Events Institute, and underneath that is the International Hurricane Research Center. I have to say that equation on the homepage is his version of that hazard risk equation. He is an absolute expert when it comes to looking at this topic in this way. And I have to let you know that was his also his quote. We have several quotes on our website that Dr. Olson has coined. And certainly using his quote as a representative of the Extreme Events Institute, I thought would be an effective one because of this conversation of risk and what can we do to make us more resilient.
And that's the crux of the issue right there, making us more resilient. It's what we do at the CRC, or try to do at the CRC every day, and it's what you do as well in your official capacity. I think we're moving in the right direction as long as we continue to have people like you out there advocating and making sure that people know about what's happening. And this equation, though, let's talk about it. It's essentially disaster, and correct me if I'm wrong here, disaster risk equals hazard plus human exposure times vulnerability. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so when you look at that, it's not like a really intense, physics or mathematics type of equation. I would say the insurance industry knows this, the hazard risk equation as well, because they have to insure, and that's connected right to the exposures of the country. The United States, continues to grow. But when it comes to the growth of the United States and the movement of the population, as I like to say, in the last 40 to 50 years, there has been a shift of the population from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, from the northern states to the southern states. And when I say southern states, the coastal regions, the Gulf Coast, Florida, and the Southeast East Coast. People are looking for warmer climates, and they're looking for the beaches. Unfortunately, this huge influx of population and exposure, buildings, urbanization, cities near our coastlines now puts all of this exposure at risk to whether that be a hurricane event and long-term sea level rise. And so things that happen along the coast. And so Florida, case in point, as I like to point out, we are the third most populous state in the country, and we're still growing. Everyone wants to come down to Florida, Bruce, and it's the great weather, great climate, great beaches, right? And we're the hurricane capital of the United States. So, third most populous, hurricane capital. Is that a collision waiting to happen? And it is. And so the insurance industry knows that. By the way, in Florida, there's big insurance challenges right now, but all across the country, anything, especially a hurricane or a major event, they're $1 billion plus hits. So that equation addresses exposure, but the vulnerability part now is, okay, what can we do moving forward? And part of that, what we talk about with our research and with the wall of wind, is building codes, building policies. And so we're trying. Florida has the strongest building code to wind right now, but you leave Florida and things begin to change. Other states are doing more, but it's still a big message that we need to beef up our building codes so that the built environment will be more resilient.
Ooh. I want to talk about building codes very, very soon. We can definitely dig into that because we just had John Vanderlint on the program a while back. And of course, I'm sure you're familiar with his work with earthquakes and everything. It was great to talk to him. But talking about this equation, sometimes it can be tricky to boil it down to math because sometimes that divorces the human side of things. But that's one of the reasons why they brought you on, because, you've been giving hurricane seminars at schools in South Florida since the 90s, trying to bring the human element to the forefront of things. And with that in mind, though, let's actually jump forward a bit. October 17, 2018. We're back in South Florida, Miami-Dade County. You have about 40 middle schoolers in the EOC going through a legit learning experience. What can you tell us about the StormZone program?
Well, that's been a very unique program as well. First of all, many of us, right? We work with kids. It's part of giving back, but we know that when you talk to the kids, it's a way to make them aware of STEM careers, get them excited, get them enthusiastic, maybe get a spark in their system to want to go in a certain STEM career. And they are the next generation, right? So there's lots of great programs out there educating kids. And when it comes to preparedness for natural hazards, and specifically hurricanes, a lot of great education programs getting middle schoolers prepared. But ours, StormZone, is unique in that it now connects a preparedness curriculum with emergency management. Who are they? What do they do? What's their role in the community? And that's what makes this unique. And so the kids learn about emergency management. And then after learning all of that with the preparedness, they then go to a real live emergency operations center in their community, the EOC, to then all take on and assume the roles of the folks that would be in an activated EOC, let's say with a hurricane approaching. And then we hit them with scenarios before the storm, real life scenarios that they have to address and respond to. And then the same thing after the storm. When they walk into an EOC, especially in Florida, they're huge in Florida. It's like walking into Disney World. They never forget the day. But again, it's now teaching them something that, wow, I never knew about emergency management. And that is a career field, and it's so important. I'll say, Bruce, real quick, I think the public understanding of emergency management, most people have heard of FEMA, but after that, they don't understand that there's State Division of Emergency Management, then county, and then municipality.
It's very true. And what a wonderful opportunity for students to get a front row seat at these things, to introduce them to these concepts, and also talk about the weather and how the state and local agencies are trying to, mitigate things. It's what strikes me when I was going, through your background. I saw so much footage of you in schools teaching kids. You really feel meteorology. You want to teach people about it. What was your impetus for getting outside of the newsroom? Because, it's one thing to be a broadcaster, but you wanted to take the lessons you learned and share them with the next generation. What compelled you to really do that?
Well, several reasons. First of all, when you talk to the kids, educate them. What is meteorology? What does a meteorologist do? But it's weather. And so, how does hailstone form, or how does lightning bolt form, or how does a hurricane develop? But beyond that, it's now the safety part. So teaching the kids the safety lessons. So preparing for a hurricane, right? Do you have pets? You got to take care of your pets. You have to have supply kit. Flashlights are better than candles because candles cause fire. Get them thinking about being prepared for a hurricane and lightning. Should you be inside or outside? Go indoors when thunder roars, like the Weather Service says. That safety part, because the teachers are doing the best they can in the classroom, but they have things they are required to teach. But I try to bring in the safety and preparedness part so the kids are ready, because those are the messages they'll take home to mom and dad. And then lastly, whatever it is you want to do, and it may not be STEM, follow your heart, follow your passion. And whatever that is, go for it. Make your dream come true. However, that journey may get difficult. It got difficult for me. The math got very difficult going to school for meteorology. And I hung in there and I didn't quit. I decided, this is my love, this is my passion, so I'm going to get extra help, mentors, tutors, get through the math that was required for me to finally become a meteorologist. So the message I love bringing to the kids, follow that heart and passion, but it's going to get hard sometimes, but you can do it. Don't quit. Get the extra help, because then you'll be most happy as a career professional. And wouldn't it be cool if you could come back to your school one day and talk about what you do?
I love it. You've given so much back over the years as a broadcaster, just keeping people informed and taking care of people. That's what it all boils down to, making sure people can make the right decisions out there, and also doing your part to immerse them in these concepts. And that's really big here. There's a quote floating around from you. You said, "I believe entertaining special effects and immersive techniques can be used to educate the public about extreme weather." With that in mind, what can you tell us about the extreme weather experience?
Well, that is, it's a concept to take all of this weather content and education and now present it in a very creative way, an immersive way. And with some of the new technologies, we have VR, we have AR, and we have Disney effects, the Disney way.
Right.
And it's a way to take this content to the public, and it's called edutainment. Education and entertainment, put it together, you have edutainment. And this is a way now we can try to get people motivated and empowered to get prepared, get ready, and do what they need to do. So it's a concept right now that hoping that, that eventually that there'll be a momentum and some projects that will connect extreme weather experience, and you'll start to see this as another way to try to do what we all need to do as part of a weather-ready nation to get everybody ready for the next storm.
And seeing is, of course, believing. And that's what you're trying to do here with this program, right? You want people to really feel what it feels like to be in a tornado or a hurricane or a really serious weather scenario, right?
Well, that would be one of the goals. And again, if you're going to immerse someone into a strong tornado or hurricane, again, the purpose, the core, we're all educators. We want to educate. Right. Secondly, we're not here for sensationalism, and we're not here to scare people per se. But we want to do it effectively so that they'll understand the power of nature, a tornado, hurricane, or otherwise, to understand that and realize that, wow, I need to do some things to be ready for the next storm. So it's kind of a fine line. We're not there to just scare and sensationalize. The goal is to educate and empower and motivate, and it can be done effectively in an immersive way. But you're right, Bruce. Feel it, touch it, hear it. It's a way you touch all the senses, and then now you've touched their soul to make them take action.
Ooh. Now, with that in mind, let me ask you, you're, of course, an Illinois native. You grew up there. You lived through the 1974 super tornado outbreak. So surely you remember the iconic film Twister from back in 96, Bill Paxton, rest in peace. That was the first film that really made everyone think about tornadoes. And we're finally getting the sequel, excuse me. We're finally getting that sequel this year. Universal's going to drop Twisters, I believe it's next month, actually. What are your thoughts on these disaster films? Did they raise awareness the right way?
Well, thinking back at Twister, a couple of things. So it really brought to the limelight tornado chasers, right? And they did it in a very effective, exciting way with special effects. And so us weather geeks and meteorologists were watching it for entertainment, eating the popcorn, enjoying the movie, the special effects. But you can't help yourselves as a weather geek meteorologist critiquing it from the technical side of things, the script, the content. Was it accurate? So there's been a lot of, over the years, there was a lot of feedback from meteorologists on the technical merit of how they did the things. All in all, I didn't think it was pretty good, all in all, except the final scene. The final scene, it was an EF5 approaching the two actors there, and they were running for their lives, and they took refuge in what that little shed with some pipes or something, and they kind of tied themselves up with that leather strap to ride out an EF5. An EF5, if that in reality had come right over their heads, right through them, they would have been gone. They would not have been, they would have been swept away. That was the only thing about Twister. But you bring up a good point. I've already been promoting it at some of my talks that this summer Twisters is coming out. It's kind of a sequel, it's a sequel, I guess, right? It doesn't have all the same actors. But I did just recently read that this time around that apparently they did go to NOAA, National Weather Service, to help review the script for technical accuracy. So I'm hoping that's true, and I'm hoping that's exactly what happened in this particular case. And I do like to say, just as something for fun, I like to mention this, especially with the kids. Think of Twister, the movie made in the 1990s, and the tornado there. And now go all the way back to the 1930s, Wizard of Oz, and think about the tornado there. So I grew up in Chicago, as you said. I got bitten by the weather bug as an elementary school kid. Most meteorologists are, with the 4 seasons of weather. But that tornado in the Wizard of Oz, to me, was fascinating. So my point is with the kids, though, is for fun, how did they create the tornado visually on screen in the 1990s with Twister versus how did they create that tornado visually on screen with the Wizard of Oz in the 1930s? What's the answer? And it's a fun little research project for any of the folks that are tuning in and listening to us. Do a little research on that. We all know with Hollywood in the 1990s, it was green screen, it was CGI, computer graphics. But in the 1930s, they didn't have any of that. So it was manually a big giant burlap sack, dust circled up by fans, 2 guys in the rafters pulling the sack back and forth, the corn stalks and the buildings, all little miniatures. So how the Hollywood used to do special effects back then versus today, it's a fun little research project for the kids, but for any of us. There was a whole book written on the special effects in Wizard of Oz, which is fascinating how they did it, right? But the tornado was the one for me.
Great films all around, Twister, Wizard of Oz, and I like what you said. It's so important to marry the facts with the special effects the right way, and hopefully Twisters will get it even more right, because I didn't know that other people are going to be reviewing this movie for factual accuracy. That's very cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing that, and I'm sure you are too. But I think you actually figured out the marriage of facts and visual components and sensationalism early on in your career with a little help from somebody special. I want to go way back right now, way back, 1970s Chicago. You were a student at that time, and you got to visit the studio at WLS-TV, and somebody very, very big was there. What can you tell us about John Coleman?
Well, he was certainly a pioneer and a trailblazer in the broadcast weather enterprise and weather industry. So, growing up in Chicago, and for many of us, they grow up in a big city. And back then, again, this goes back in the dark ages. We didn't have cable. We didn't have all the streaming networks that we have today. You had 4 stations, okay? You had ABC, NBC, CBS, and, Fox, and of course you had PBS. And in Chicago, we also had WGN, and then big independent. So my point is this: when you're growing up back then in the 1960s into the 70s, the local television anchors, news, weather, and sports were bigger than life, right? They were your hometown celebrities. Right. And so when I graduated from University of Illinois, and then I went to Northern Illinois to work on my master's. But as an interested meteorologist, as a student, I thought, well, I'll call the TV station and see if I could come in and watch a newscast and actually talk to the meteorologist, the weather person. And I didn't know any better. I just picked up the phone and called. And I did that with several of the stations. And back then, they actually picked up the phone and talked to you, and they said, yes, come on in. Yeah. So that was, thinking back, wow, they were giving back. How great it is that they gave their time to bring in a student. And so being able to visit with someone like John Coleman, who was bigger than life, and did a lot of a new way of weathercasting with chroma key, and he had a very energetic, entertaining type of personality. That was his style of delivering the weather. And then he was also the brainchild for creating the Weather Channel. And he had this vision. Back then, when you thought about it, geez, a channel devoted all to sports, who would watch that? ESPN.
That's it.
There would be a channel that is nothing but news. Who would watch that? CNN, right? And others, right? A channel all about weather, nothing else. Who would watch that? Well, he had this vision and knew the Weather Channel. And so it was his brainchild. He did a lot of work to get that started. But then, unfortunately, some things happened with the relationships back then. And then he was no longer connected with the Weather Channel. But to meet someone like that, a trailblazer, a pioneer, in the industry, for me at that age was a big treat. I did the same thing with other pillars of television meteorology. Harry Volkman for many years in Chicago. Tom Skilling for many years in Chicago. Meeting them at that time. And then at Northern Illinois University, they had a connection with WLS TV with an internship. Another gentleman, Tom Bobula, was a behind-the-scenes meteorologist. That's how they used to do it at some big markets. The weathercaster maybe was not a meteorologist, but they had a meteorologist behind the scenes. So I was interning in that scenario, and then as already having a BS degree, I was eligible that when that Tom, the meteorologist behind the scenes, took time off, I then pitched in and became the meteorologist behind the scenes, preparing all the weather forecasts for the on-air talent at that time. So that was invaluable in terms of getting me primed for television.
And that's how you got your start. And it's so amazing how these, as you said, these pillars of broadcasting were so accessible, and they took you under their wing. And while they were inventing wild concepts like, oh, let's have Doppler radar projected in the background so we can talk through the newscast. Brilliant, brilliant concept there. And you got to see these concepts evolve and then eventually use them. But let's go even further back here to some moments that might have really set you on a very deliberate path. You grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and I have it on very, very good authority that you always look forward to seeing the fireflies light up in the summertime. But there was something else that lit up your world when you were growing up, something that really put you on a path toward, what you have right now. What can you tell us about trees and lightning strikes as a youth?
Well, that's part of my story when I talk to the kids. What got me, one of the things that got me triggered into the interest of meteorology, again, as I say, it seems to be a common denominator with meteorologists being bitten by the weather bug. Well, there was a time when I was very, very small in our home in the suburbs, Mundelein, and a lightning bolt hit a big tree just outside my window, and it scared me to death. And that particular night, we had some of my cousins were spending the night. And so I went running down the hallway, running and screaming and crying. And I remember my cousins were laughing at me. But that weather moment of fear, as I tell the kids, the fear then grew into a curiosity, which then grew into a passion to learn about it, study it, and to make it a career. But that curiosity of how did that lightning bolt form? How did it occur? And there's still mysteries even today on the formation of lightning. Mm-hmm. But it was that weather moment that triggered it. And some other weather moments in the Chicago area. Tornado. We've had tornadoes come by occasionally in the springtime, but coming close, and that feeling when the tornado sirens would go off, the TV and the radio would come out with the warning, and then having to run downstairs into the basement. And when you're a little kid, that can be kind of fearful because you don't know what's going to happen. And then taking cover in the basement. Our home never did get a direct hit, but that feeling, but again, that feeling of fear going to the basement from the tornado, same thing, the curiosity which led to a passion and a real deep interest about how do tornadoes form. So much so now there's no fear to run into the basement. It's like run outside and you want to see it. You want to, and get
the video for social media.
Yeah, right. It's so, but, and then the big blizzard of 1967 that hit Chicago, very famous one. My first experience of thunder snow. What I mean by that, lightning and thunder in a blizzard. And you're like, wait a minute, that should happen in a thunderstorm, not a snowstorm. How does that happen?
And I want to set the stage for our listeners regarding that blizzard of 67. It's the evening of January 25th. Back in 67, the high temperature the day before was 65 degrees. It's very, very warm for January in the Chicago area. And the forecasters, they're all saying you're going to get a little bit of freezing rain, just a little bit. And then at about 5 a.m. on 26 January, the heavens, they open up and the snow started to fall. What was it like being there on location and experiencing that thunder snow as a youth?
Well, so it was amazing. So first of all, schools canceled. That's pretty cool, right? Back then, everyone's listening intently. The WGN radio would start announcing which schools are off. And all the kids in the whole Chicago metro area, I know, are watching on WGN or listening on radio for the name of their school. So we're off for, as an end result. And there were snow drifts everywhere. And I remember digging tunnels into the big snow drifts. But that night before, as the storm was hitting, to the flash of lightning was just vividly, I still remember it today, just seeing it and then hearing the thunder and just never forgot it. It just was like, wow. But as a little kid, I know most little kids, when a blizzard is hitting, when you're a little kid, it's all for fun. You're going to have fun in the snow and throw snowballs and build snowmen and dig tunnels. It's adults when you got to drive in it, you got to work in it. Then it's maybe not so fun anymore. But back then, the wonder of a snowstorm and blizzard and what was happening was a childhood memory for me, and I know for many Chicagoans remembering that storm.
Right, snow it's a beautiful thing until you got to chisel your car out of a block of ice to get to work. Yeah, and it happened again in '79, I believe. So
yes,
double whammy there.
Another opportunity and another time seeing the thunder snow, right? Same thing. That was a very, the late 70s were very intense winters in the United States. And several of them hit Chicago, including the Midwest as well, parts of the Midwest, but Chicago, and seeing it again there. And again, that's a sign of a very strong storm system. The general science, if you're going to have lightning, you have to have strong updrafts and downdrafts. And typically you don't get that in a winter storm. You get that in powerful cumulonimbus thunderstorms. But it then shows you then if you're getting strong updrafts and downdrafts and creating lightning, you're going to get dumped on also with a lot of snow because it just shows you the dynamics, and that's what happened.
And these storms, they really affect buildings. And in fact, I saw a figure connected to your work. For every dollar spent on fortified construction, we save $6 to $11 on the back end after disasters occur. That's according to the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies. But this leads us to what you're doing now with the wall of wind. Erik, what is the wall of wind, and what's the relationship between that and Hurricane Andrew?
Okay, sure. That's the picture I have behind me, the incredible wall of wind, 12 yellow giant fans. What we're able to do is create up to Category 5 hurricane conditions. The whole purpose is to test structures to see how we can design them to be stronger against hurricane force winds. So back to the big picture of how can we make things more resilient. So the wall of wind, we didn't start with 12, we started with 2. There were 2 airboat engines, one on top of the other. The engineers learned from that. Then they went to 6, 500 horsepower engines turning the blades. So 6 fans, and then behind me and what you see as the 12 electric fan motors. And so the wall of wind, it's all because of Hurricane Andrew. And so tying a lot of these topics together, we're the hurricane capital of the country, but at that time in 1992, we hadn't had a hit for a while. And then came Andrew, a Category 5 just south of the Miami metro area. And it was totally devastating. But it woke up Florida to the fact we are the hurricane capital of the country, and it changed everything, emergency management and research and building codes, to where Florida became the leader of all of these things. And so what triggered the Wall of Wind program was Andrew. And so through funding through the state of Florida, we started the program, and then came the big advancement, if you will, when we then graduated and became part of the NSF NHERI program, which is the National Network of Experimental Facilities of Hazards across the country. So now it put the Wall of Wind on the national stage of research. So wind engineering projects funded by NSF, by faculty across the nation, could bring their project down to the Wall of Wind and get it tested. So it's a fascinating facility in terms of the various projects that it does. We can also put water into the system to replicate 8 to 9 inches of rainwater per hour. So some tests are just wind, some are wind and water. And again, it's all for research, where FIU is very proud of that part, and also being part of NSF and their mission with these facilities, and the students involved. We are now training the next generation of wind engineers.
Absolutely. And this machinery, it really can simulate a Cat 5 hurricane. And you have covered those types of storms, so you know what it's like to actually be there. Is this really comparable? Is it a one-to-one in your professional opinion?
Absolutely. It's the closest thing that Mother Nature can create in the real world. And there was, as we said, it was a graduating process, 2 fan, 6 fan to 12 fan. And so a lot of time and effort was put into the design and engineering of this system, more than just, well, let's get 12 big fans and let's make a strong wind. they had to, first of all, the 12 fans themselves would not have necessarily gotten us to Category 5. Just beyond the fans, the engineers had to design what's called a contraction zone. And a law of physics says if you contract the volume and space of where that air is flowing through, the speed at which it comes on the one end, it'll speed up and come out faster at the other end. So that basic description of physics helped get us to Cat 5. That was a huge success. And then a hurricane wind is not just nice and small, straight and narrow and laminar, we call. It's very turbulent. So to be a hurricane replicator for research that's going to say we tested to a hurricane, they had to get the wind field, the flow, accurate as well. So they did that through various techniques on the other side of the fans, where in the flow management, in the real world, wind increases with height, the atmospheric boundary layer condition. So in our flow management, they had to create the same environment, wind increasing with height. They did it with a system of tiles, friction, if you will, pieces to slow the air movement on the bottom of that flow management so it's faster at the top of it. So then when that wind hits that structure, as I said, it's now as close to a real hurricane condition that's replicated, and it's been verified and calibrated. So it's very realistic to a hurricane wind.
The ingenuity here, it really is remarkable. And now the wall of wind is part of the network here. See, we had Dan Cox on a while back talking about the Hinsdale Wave Research Laboratory. They can simulate tsunamis over there and hurricanes, hurricane storm surges over there. Then you've got John Vanderlint, who's doing the shake table stuff in Japan, the world's largest shake table. They can simulate earthquakes, the largest earthquakes in the world. And now we've got the wall of wind. We can talk about, dialing things down on wind and everything. And the government has taken notice. I mean, you've gotten funding, but FEMA also paid you a visit back in 2022. They made a special announcement about modernizing our building codes based on your research. Let me ask you, how do you feel about that? And what can you tell us about the advancements made thanks to that research?
Well, that was a big day. We were all very excited when FEMA and the White House came to the Wall of Wind June 1st, a couple of years ago, to have a big press conference right in front of the fans, pictured behind me, to make this big announcement, and that is this National Building Code Initiative. So we are very happy for this announcement. They weren't passing new laws or anything like that, but making this announcement that building codes is the way we have to go. Building codes work. We've proved that in Florida. We've proved it with the Wall of Wind, and they're so costly now. We see these multi-billion-dollar natural hazard events. And so they made this announcement saying that across the nation, and FEMA gets it, and that's great, that we need to keep enhancing these building codes around the country so that we can be more resilient. And so that back to the equation, hazard, risk, exposure, and vulnerability, that vulnerability, bring that down, because now if buildings can withstand the types of hazard they'll be hit with, it saves everybody money, the homeowner, the insurance industry, the cleanup efforts. So it does work. It's being financially proactive so that we can start saving money. So that was an important message to make, and we were very happy and proud to be a part, and as a backdrop to what they were announcing.
It's real big, and this is a common theme that I see with our colleagues that are involved in NHERI. You're trying to get ahead of things, making sure that you head things off of the past before things get bad. That's why building codes are getting changed, and we're seeing a lot of advancements in that realm. People are listening to you, and that's good. We want that. We want change, and sooner, preferably sooner rather than later. And speaking of getting ahead of things, you mentioned students. Let's talk about the Wall of Wind Mitigation Challenge. This is every year. Tell us a bit about what you're doing with high school students here.
Well, it's the Wall of Wind Mitigation Challenge is a great now outreach event. So how can we take this great facility and connect with the local students, the engineers, STEM career professionals of the future. And so came up with the idea, let's do a competition. And as you know, across the country every year, there's lots of great competitions, solar car competitions and science fairs and different kinds of things like that. So we came up with the Wall of Wind Challenge. And so what happens is we have our engineering team come up with the challenge for that year, and we then give it to the high school student teams. They come up with the solution, and they get to come to FIU on the real Wall of Wind and actually test their structure against the winds of the Wall of Wind. And again, it's a day they never forget. And to be there and see the real Wall of Wind, they're always on the edge of their seat. And it's an experience that is so valuable. And Miami-Dade, Broward County schools just love the competition so much. They also do a research paper as part of their scoring. They do a live PowerPoint presentation to a panel of judges. There's judges with their wind test. All the scores are added up. We get a first, second, third place winner. But again, it's teamwork. It's ingenuity. It's working together and putting all this together for the competition. So it's a great way to bring it into the community, bring it into the schools where they get to come, and it's a real great partnership. And it's one that's been very successful.
Ooh, and they get to really see the fruits of your labor. You know, this idea that ring shank nails are better than regular, that there's this concrete roofing system that's better than the ordinary stuff. And, you can put wind turbines on top of buildings and mitigate some damage. It's really cool to see the students kind of, unlock the potential of what you're doing there. I like that a lot. And this is all happening at Florida International University. And of course, NSF is funding the Wall of Wind. But they also gave you about $12 million back in 2022. That money was meant to make a national testing lab for community hardening. Can you give us the scoop on that project and where it's at right now?
So, yes, now a new vision of a new research facility connected with NSF, and it's NICH, niche, the acronym. There's a web page now on the Design Safe NHERI website for niche, so everyone can just search for NSF niche, NICHE, and follow the progress. So the vision is now to create a larger system that instead of going to 157 miles an hour, we go to 200 miles an hour. So think of the Hurricane Dorians of the world and these other strongs that have been intensifying to 180, 190, 200. Secondly, now think of imagine conceptually a giant Olympic-sized swimming pool as part of the facility and have the fans blow the wind across the water. So now the structure is not only getting hit by wind, but it's now getting hit by storm surge and wave action. So now you're natural hazards under one roof, and now you can now test to these stronger systems. It's a huge vision. FIU is the lead, but we're not alone. It's a 9 universities. It's an all-star lineup of engineers working on this vision. And we're close to working on prototypes, a wind prototype, a water prototype. And if everything keeps going then there would be the day where there would be a larger grant issued to pay for this new system, which would be built. Timeline, it could be 4 or 5 years down the road yet. How expensive the new place will be, no one has an exact number, but it'll probably be in the hundreds of millions. We shall wait and see. But that will now be a place to now recreate. We talked about Wall of Wind recreating today's Wall of Wind recreating a Hurricane Andrew. But now, if you think about a system creating a Hurricane Dorian or some of these others, you brought up a good point. Where climate and extreme events are going. So rather being reactive, it's being proactive, trying to stay ahead of what we're seeing are staying and taking the science to be proactive to where the Mother Nature is taking us so that we can continue to test against these large scale hazards. And rather than the public 10 years from now saying, if you knew this was coming or saw that was happening, why didn't you develop and create something? And now being proactive is that we are creating something, and there will be something, hopefully, that will then be able to address these much larger storms.
Ooh, absolutely. I like the idea of community hardening, and it's true. $12 million, that's a lot of money. So some people are thinking, well, is it worth the investment? Would you say it's worth the investment right now?
No question. You brought up the point already with the statistics on mitigation. For every $1 spent, we'll save at least 6, 7, 8, and depending on the structure and application, $10 or more. $1 saving $8 in damage and cleanup. That's being fiscally responsible and proactive when we need to do it. Urbanization is not only the United States, it's around the world. But if we can be the leader and show then how we have to build differently and better and stronger, it will pay itself off. It needs to be done because things are getting way too expensive. And so the way to do that is now being proactive in research like this and eventually building codes to now bring down those damage costs.
Absolutely. And once again, I'm reminded of Dr. John Vandelin's research and how what he did changed building codes around the world. So it's not just local. What you're doing here is reaching out globally. The impact is going to be around the world here. And of course, with things heating up across, everywhere, we're going to see a need for this kind of stuff sooner before later. And speaking of that, hurricane season, it's coming. It is on its way. And I got this hot tip from an unverified source here that if a hurricane hits, the safest room in the Erik Salna household is the laundry room. Is that true? And if so, what makes it the safest room in this kind of situation? Because our listeners need to know where to go in their own homes when things get dicey.
Right. So, we're coming into a busy hurricane season. We've all been witnessing unfortunately, a very active and deadly tornado season. And there's some crossover on some of this safety and preparedness, right? So first of all, when there is a severe windstorm, hurricane, severe thunderstorm, or tornado, you need to go to the safest place in your home or business. But for the home, the lowest level. So houses up north, and that's what I grew up in Chicago, the basement. Go to the basement to ride out the storm. Here in Florida and other places where you don't have a basement, it's that lowest floor away from exterior walls and exterior windows. So it's usually a centrally located place in your home, and many times it's an interior hallway, a closet, or a bathroom with no windows, or the laundry room. And yes, the laundry room in our home is one of those places to find refuge. And the great work that the Institute of Building and Home Safety did with some of their research, close all your interior doors before the storm hits, the bathroom doors, closet doors, bedroom doors. It's one last line of defense, and taking that safe place, cover your head with a helmet, if you have a bicycle helmet or something. And that's where you ride it out. And so whether it be a tornado or for a hurricane. And what's interesting, we've come a long way over the years on some of this safety. They used to say in tornado land or hurricane land, open up a window just a crack before the storm hits because you want to equalize the pressure. Well, we realized over the years that's not really what's been doing the damage. It's really the brute force of the wind hurling flying debris at windows and doors, and windows smashing and cracking open, and then there goes your roof. So you don't want to open up a window. So you don't even worry about the window. Go to your safe place. So don't worry about opening windows. You want to keep them closed. And in hurricane land, it's all about shuttering our windows and protecting the building envelope and shuttering those windows. So no more opening windows anymore. That's old education. We have new education. And in hurricane land, putting tape on a window as if that's going to protect the window from damage. Tape does nothing. We used to all do it, but now today we know it's ridiculous. But there's still some folks out there doing it, so the education part continues.
I was going to ask about that because I remember being a young boy in elementary school, and they would always say, make sure you open the windows. So I wanted to get a definite answer. Is that the right thing to do? So the answer is no. The window thing, it's out. It's done. It's over.
Right. It's there is a difference of pressure between the outside and the inside. That's correct. But that's not what's really causing this damage to this house to explode. It's flying debris basically hitting the windows and then wind coming in the structure, and then there goes the roof. Yeah, it's so they were looking at it, and it was accurate, but now we realize the pressure part, that's not the big thing here making the damage.
Ooh, now, with that in mind, with destruction being the biggest factor in these disasters here, what should the building codes really look like in places like Florida and in coastal areas?
Well, Florida is the leader. We have one of the strongest wind building codes in the nation. There's using, different ways to look at that, but in terms of wind rating, wind loading, and that's the wind engineering part of it, but simple techniques that have been done in Florida and now elsewhere that can really, really help. First of all, the shape of the roof, HIP, H-I-P, that's the most aerodynamic, okay? There are gable roofs out there, flat roofs, but HIP is the most aerodynamic, and a lot of new homes are being built with that shape. Secondly, requiring new home construction to have window protection built into it. If you do that on the front end, it's, over a 30-year mortgage or whatever, it's not that much more of a cost. So having that window protection. The big thing also is those metal straps holding the roof to the wall, so the roof doesn't blow off. Those metal straps are pennies on the dollar. They're very, very inexpensive, right? And you connect the wall to the wall, roof to the top of the wall, and then connect the base of the wall to the slab. You see with some of the latest tornado damage, the whole roof has slidden right off the concrete slab because it wasn't anchored. So anchor the slab, use hurricane straps, protect the windows, and garage doors. Biggest opening, and if that fails, you've got big problems. So you can have a better, stronger, reinforced garage door. So if building codes were starting to require some of these things that we know work, that would save so much damage. And not just in hurricane land, but in tornado land. We've seen all the tornadoes in the last few months. A lot of these techniques could also help protect homeowners in the Midwest as well.
Ooh, the whole time you're talking, I'm thinking about Katrina and how some structures might have withstood some of that if the codes had been where they should have been. And that came through in, it was 2005. And around that time, you actually made a shift from broadcasting and you started to really lean in toward hazard mitigation. With that in mind, what can you tell us about the Disaster Survival House?
Well, that was right. That was the first stop in my journey, my career journey, when I decided to leave full-time television to get more full into hazard mitigation and weather education and research. And so the Disaster Survival House, very unique place. So it was a 2,000 square foot home that was built by State Farm Insurance in the city of Deerfield Beach, Florida. Mm-hmm. And it was part of it was because back then under FEMA, James Lee Witt was the head of FEMA, and they had a program called Project Impact, which was a great program talking about what we're talking about today, and that is all about mitigation. So, municipalities could apply to become a FEMA project impact community. Deerfield Beach just happened to be the very first one to apply. They got the designation as a project impact community. So State Farm then decided to build this home in Deerfield Beach to be a demonstration home of how you can build a home Code Plus to Cat 5 strength, roof design, walls, the windows, the entire construction. And they had a lot of safety features inside the home that could stop fires and make the inside environment safer as well. So it was an inside-outside safe demonstration home. And then the city, or State Farm, gave it to the city. And there was a vision in the city of Deerfield Beach to build a 50,000 square foot hurricane learning center, if you will, kind of like a museum and training center. And that vision was hurricane warning, and the disaster survival house was the home base for that project. So I came in there and reconverted the house into a mini hurricane learning center. Each room had a storyline on preparedness, science, mitigation, wind, developing your plan. And it was the little house that could. We did tours with kids. We had media conferences with the National Hurricane Center directors. With all of this messaging, and State Farm remained a partner, but we really used it in that way. And the big project never happened. The politics changed.
Sure.
But that's what that project was all about. And it was interesting for State Farm, and they built a few of these demonstration homes around the country. Not a lot of them, but that was one in Deerfield Beach. But it was showing you the examples of how we can be more resilient in the building of a home.
Any lessons learned during that era that really stand out to you? Because it seems like you took that experience and you built on it for the rest of your career here. Well,
I've already talked about the science of meteorology, and over my career, learning how we're many partners, NOAA, National Weather Service, but FEMA and local emergency management, municipalities, they're doing their best to harden their communities, right? So learning more about the aspects of that. But then wind engineering, roof design, but how a home can be built stronger. The outside of that house, every window, we created what we call the shutter showroom to show the different varieties of shutters in the marketplace, so people could kind of see, okay, I see there's not just one kind of shutter, there's many different ones. So it's learning those aspects when it comes to a hurricane. And so as a meteorologist, you learn it in a book, but to be multidisciplinary, and like today, I take the meteorology students here at FIU to the Wall of Wind, learn wind engineering, learn emergency management, do community outreach, and so it lends itself to being more well-rounded, but also partnerships. And let me call them friendships, and working together and sincerely with partners in your community as a team to have a common goal and a common mission. So other experience from the Disaster Survival House, working with the different agencies together. And if you do it right, with a great team, with one mission, you can do great things.
I love that. It definitely takes a village here. It's a team effort here. We're all in this together, and that's a great message that we can take with us to everything that we do here. But let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about what people really want to hear, the real dirt. Erik, let me ask you, what is your forecast for the 2024 hurricane season?
Well, it's going to be a busy one. Going at the latest hurricane conferences here in the last couple of months and hearing some of the other experts talk and present, we've already heard some of the other early forecasts come out. NOAA is going to officially come out with theirs on May 23rd. But unfortunately, the conditions look favorable for an active season. Last year, everybody talked about El Nino. And for those that need a little refresher, El Nino versus La Nina. It's all in the Pacific Ocean. El Nino has to do with warmer waters than average, and La Nina is the opposite, colder waters than average. And it's interesting how things that happen in the Pacific can affect things that happen in the Atlantic Ocean when it comes to the hurricane season. Last year, we had El Nino, which is supposed to bring the numbers down a bit, but we had abnormally warm sea surface temperatures. So last year, 2023, there was a real tug of war, we thought, but the warm sea surface temperatures won out. And look at how many storms, 20 storms? We didn't make it to the secondary list, thank goodness, but the steering current saved us. So many storms were curving in the Atlantic. Now fast forward to this year. El Nino's gone, now bring in La Nina, which historically could tend to bump the numbers up. We still have this incredibly warm sea surface temperatures. Now you have both, no tug of war, you now have both pushing in the same direction, and the forecasts that are coming out showing the highest numbers ever for April forecasts. And that does not make us feel well about this upcoming season. So the steering currents, we're hoping will turn a lot of them away. But first of all, as all the Hurricane Center directors have said, the numbers don't matter. The numbers should not dictate how we prepare. We should prepare the same each and every season anyway. But certainly it's getting media attention. I think people are paying attention. So this season, right now, anyone that lives in a hurricane-prone area and can get inland effects from flooding rains, now is the time to make sure you're getting ready with your supply kit, your family preparedness plan, because this could be one of those historical hurricane seasons. Unfortunately, I hope we don't have to go to that secondary list. But if steering currents are not favorable, there may be some hits. We don't know where they're going to be. East Coast, Florida, Gulf Coast, we hope nowhere. Florida, as we know, historically is the leader with hurricane landfall. So we have to be really, really ready here in the state of Florida. So getting ready, be prepared. And the other part of it, Bruce, is the people part. And we know when these hurricanes hit, it's people, it's families, it's their homes, it's their businesses, it's their retirements. There's the sadness of devastation. And this summer, if we get 23 storms or more, let's just hope that doesn't happen across our coastal areas. So this season, just be ready, get ready, and there's still time. So whether it's hardening your home, shutters, or also then, double check your insurance policy, homeowner's insurance policy. There's still time, but you want to look at it now, your coverages, contents, as well as dwelling, and take a picture and video inventory of everything in your house. If you haven't done it for a period of time, then now you have proof of the loss to the insurance company, and flood insurance. I recommend, if your family budget can afford it, get it. Even if it's not required where you live, it gives you peace of mind. Where I live in South Florida, Broward County, it's roughly about $500 for the year because it's not technically required where I live. But if we got a slow-moving hurricane coming into Broward County, moving at 5 miles an hour, dropping 30 inches of rain, that water is going to pile up. So, but for folks that live in mountainous areas near rivers, streams, floodplains, flood insurance, there's still the messaging for everyone to get it if you can get it. And if you don't need it, still strongly consider it. But have these conversations with your insurance agent.
Ooh, I really, really like what you said about the numbers not mattering, because it's true. A hurricane is a hurricane, no matter how strong or weak it is. If it hits you, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt everybody in the vicinity. And I like the specific recommendations you have too, because a lot of times we get very general with our recommendations. You've got deliberate steps of action that people can take to really take the pain away if it does come to that. And with that in mind, let me ask you though about some broader concepts. Let's say hypothetically that the president is here with the cabinet, everybody, and they're saying, "Hey, Erik, we are going to do exactly what you tell us. How should we tackle severe weather?" Is there something that stands out to you that policymakers need to be doing that they are not doing right now?
Well, there's probably many answers to that question, and it's not one fix-all thing, but that's okay. But there's different ways to look at it. Then continue to listen to the experts in the research community. Some of these great nonprofits that are doing great work in this area for our congressional members to continue to be educated and informed with this knowledge, and then activate on it. It comes down to budgeting, and we know it's tough. We know the federal budget is a huge pie. But again, these are proactive measures that can start saving money, right? And FEMA knows it. And so building codes, right? Doing more in that direction, to help have a community get less damage before a storm hits. What can we do about the insurance challenges and the cost of insurance? We know that's our own state legislature here in Florida is working on that. But beyond that, what can be done? It's not easy. These are tough. But there are some things that can start to prove and make results. The education outreach part, the communication education part is still important. Supporting NOAA and the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center and the hurricane hunters. Personally, they should have all the money that they ask for. The Weather Service and what they do, the return on investment, that small little tiny agency compared to the big giant federal bureaucracy, and the return on investment, National Weather Service and NOAA and the Hurricane Center gives all of us. We take it for granted. We turn on we get a weather forecast. It's on our phone. It's on TV. Well, where does that come from? Well, it comes from some agencies that are doing the best they can. And another suggestion is to continually to support the efforts of those agencies. And when it comes to hurricanes, research, of course, and the hurricane hunters, making sure they can do all the flights that they need to do with this hurricane season. So there are some areas within the federal budget that it's just very wise and good to continue to support it and make sure they have the resources they need. There's been certainly progress on hurricane forecasting day to day, and then daily forecast for your local weather, but hurricane forecast track and intensity, but there's still room for improvement. So, continuing to support those efforts is very important.
I really hope we have some hurricane hunters tuning in for this podcast here. And also, to our congressional listeners, take note, hurricane hunters, a worthwhile investment. They're doing some serious work. And again, getting ahead of things. We want to be proactive, just like you said, get in front of the issue. And that makes things easier when things get critical. Wrapping up here, we've talked about so much here. I want to just dip our toes into the climate change pool very briefly here, because as you said, this storm season might be a rough one. Is there a connection, you think, between imminent severe weather and climate change and sea level rise? How do you feel about this?
It's we're seeing effects, and there's more and more research, more and more technical papers coming out. The latest consensus when it comes to hurricanes is that there'll be slower, wetter, and more rapid intensification. So slower just because of changing steering currents, wetter just because of more moisture in the atmosphere, it can drop more rain, and rapid intensification. We saw that with Hurricane Ian a couple of years ago. with warmer sea surface temperatures. So those effects, there's more published papers coming out that are going in this direction of seeing effects for hurricane seasons. And of course, sea level rise. There's tidal gauges and measuring the rise of sea level on all our coastlines. And Florida is one of those places where we're seeing the sea level rise. And so what are communities going to do to adapt and defend themselves from sea level rise? And different communities are being affected at different amounts of sea level rise, but that proactive thinking, government officials or elected officials, elected folks may think short term, but these are long term issues. And that's tough to think long term when some folks may be thinking short term for various reasons, but to come up with the investment into these long term solutions. So at coastal communities where there's sea level rise, that is going to be a challenge for all coastal communities, and how are they going to address that? Big issues in front of us.
And this is why we're in this game, right? CRC, NHERI, we're working toward the same goals here, protecting shoreline, protecting the people who live on the shoreline, making sure that hazards are mitigated to the point where people have better options, better chances for survive and thrive out here. Man, we could do a second show based on that line of questioning alone. And boy, I'd love to do it, but I know we're coming up on time here. Let me ask you, Erik, is there anything that you want to tell the people right now? Any message you want to get out? Any tip you want to get out? I want to open the floor up to you. Just let us know what we should know.
Well, I think right in front of us is this hurricane season. So just making sure folks are prepared. You're going through your checklist and what you're going to need to ride out the next storm. It's inevitable. You may lose power. We can survive storms, but how are you going to survive without power? So flashlights, batteries, these kinds of things, NOAA weather radio, having a battery operated NOAA weather radio. Generators, portable generators are a great thing to have. They give us power, but generator safety, right? Being careful with those things. But having your checklist so that we're ready to ride out the storms coming up that potentially could affect us this hurricane season. And just big picture then, just being ready no matter where you live to whatever your natural hazard may be in your community, and doing what you can to be prepared with that through your checklist as well. So I think that's, where the rubber hits the road right now initially with this active hurricane season that's potentially ahead of us, right? And staying informed and supporting efforts in your local community. There's lots of great nonprofits. We know Red Cross, Salvation Army, your local churches, groups and organizations that are there to help us afterwards, supporting them, donating to those causes, your local emergency management, right? And so on, supporting their efforts. So being part of that team from the local community, and bottom line, neighbor helping neighbor. So where you live on your street, if you know of some elderly folks that may need a helping hand before a storm or after a storm, checking up on them, making sure they're okay. There's a program called CERT, a community emergency response team through local emergency management, where you're trained to be a helper in your street after a big event, to do possibly minor first aid or damage assessment, be in contact with local first responders. That's another way to get involved and be involved in having a caring, compassion part of your plan to help all your neighbors out, so you can help, so everyone will be able to ride it through together.
That program you just mentioned, sir, I want to plug that for our listeners. Where can they go to get more information about that?
I would have everyone that wants to be involved in this way to contact their local Office of Emergency Management. So whether it be a city, let's say City of Fort Lauderdale Emergency Management or the county, Broward County Emergency Management. Start there first. Ask them about CERT team, CERT, and if they have a program, and they'll give you all the information on where you can go to get trained and be ready.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, Erik, because Shoreside is about connecting people with the critical issues, and this is a connection that I think would benefit us all. So we'll have the link in the description below the video to our listeners. Make sure you check that out because, again, it takes a village, and an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Be prepared no matter where you are. That's the message we got to take away. And Erik, thank you for delivering that. I think nobody could have done it like you've done it today. It has been an honor and a privilege to have you on the show, and I just cannot thank you enough for being here with us on Shoreside.
Well, you're very welcome. My pleasure, Bruce. Happy to help.
And hopefully we can catch up maybe a little bit later. I'd love to see some NHERI folks at our next meeting. Hopefully that'll happen. But until then, to our fantastic listeners, check out our website, coastalresilientcenter.org. Also, links in the description for Erik Salna's work. Also, follow all of our Twitter and social feeds through Linktree. That's Linktree/Coastal Resilience. That's a wrap for today. As always, thank you for tuning in. So very thrilled to be seeing you Shoreside. Special thanks to NHERI 2. More great guests on the way. Much more to come. But for now, it's Bruce Rosenblum signing off from Shoreside. We'll see you real soon.